And Darlene, thank you. So now I will call the meeting to order for the recording. And Darlene, will you please do a roll call and then introduce or let us know others who are here today?
Yes, Madam Chair. Okay, for roll call, we'll do Committee Member Sauce.
Here.
Committee Member Hudson.
Here.
Committee Member Anderson.
Here.
Committee Member Worth.
Here.
Vice Chair Stepper.
Here.
And Chair Geringer.
Here.
Great. Okay, so I can kind of see people still coming in, but we'll do some agency staff members. So I'll start with the City of San Ramon 501 Contra Costa, Darlene Amaral. We also have.
Thank you.
Go ahead. Good. No. I didn't know who was doing it.
Okay. City of San Ramon, Lisa Bobadilla.
Okay. Sorry here. Let me just grab all my notes here. How about from the town of Danville?
He is absent, Darlene.
Okay.
He will not be here today.
All righty. The City of Lafayette.
Yes, Sia Shojat, City of Lafayette.
Thank you. Town of Moraga.
I saw Brett.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm just trying to figure out. So Brett Swain, Town of Moraga.
Thank you. City of Orinda.
Ethan Chen, City of Orinda staff.
Thank you. Contra Costa County.
Robert Sarmiento, Contra Costa County staff.
Thank you. How about CCTA staff?
Matt Kelly, CCTA.
Thank you.
I think we have several. Yeah. Hi, Colin.
Yeah.
Hi there.
Yeah.
Colin Clark, CCTA Planning.
Thank you, Colin.
Hi, John Huang, CCTA staff.
Perfect. Thank you. And then I see Bart.
Hi, Ricky Wells, Bart.
And I see County Connection.
Melody Reeves, County Connection.
And then also from the City of San Ramon, Brian.
I'm Brian.
Sorry for the delay there, Brian Bornstein.
Thank you. And then from MTC, Barbara.
Find my unmute. This is Barbara Lauren.
Thank you.
Transportation Commission.
Okay. Now, who else? Who am I missing? I am missing. Oh, the consultant from Miriam Pierce.
Everyone, Terrence Chow from Farron Pierce.
Perfect.
Welcome.
I think that's everyone.
Great. Thank you. And when we get back in person, we'll do the self-introductions around the table again. But so thank you for doing that, Darlene. So now we'll move on to public comment. And this is for where we invite members of the public who are welcome to speak to the commission on any items that are not on the agenda. And when we went through, I'm not sure that I saw any members of the public on our list, but if there are any, please raise your hand at this time and we will call on you. And I think that everybody who's here is affiliated with an agency or an elected. So now we'll move on to board member comments. Are there any members of the committee who have any comments? And I'm seeing no nodding of the head or raising of hands, so we will move on from there. Darlene, are there any administrative items today?
Not at this time, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to the consent calendar, agenda item number 5. Are there any committee members who want to pull an item or comment on an item before I ask for public comment and then a motion? And I'm not seeing any hands raised. And so are there any members of the public who would like to comment on a consent item? Raise your hand. And I'm not seeing any hands raised or any members of the public still. So do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I'll make a motion to approve our consent calendar.
Thank you, committee member. and David Hudson. So we have a motion by committee member Anderson and a second by committee member Hudson. Darlene, will you do the roll call vote?
Yes. Committee member Hudson,
Aye.
committee member Anderson,
Aye.
committee member Worth,
Aye.
committee member Sauce,
Yes.
vice chair Stepper, and chair Geringer.
Aye.
Great. All right. So that passes 6-0.
Great, thank you very much. And ends our consent calendar, and we'll move on to regular agenda items. And we'll start off with agenda item 6A. We will receive an update on the I-680 Contra Costa Express Lane from provided to us by Barbara Lawrenson from MTC.
Thank you so much.
And welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Darlene, do you want to bring up the presentation?
Yes, that's what let's see. Hopefully this works. Do you guys see all that? Everybody sees it?
Whoops. Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I do.
All right. Well, thank you. It's good to be here again. And we'll go to the next slide because MTC is pleased to let you know finally that the tolling is going to start on that southbound extension that goes from Martinez to connect with the existing lane on August 20th at 5 a.m. So, whoops, go back one more.
Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to.
So you see on the left here what the configuration of the lanes looks currently or has looked like for the last year, where we have a continuous HOV lane from Martinez down to the open express lane. So that part that's in orange, we're going to turn on the tolling equipment on August 20th, and it'll be a continuous tolled lane from Marina Vista down to Al Costa Boulevard southbound, and then the northbound lane stays the same. I'll point out that you're probably familiar by now, but we have two sections of restricted access. So that's a double striped white line between the express lane and the general purpose lane from 242 down to South Main Street, and again after the 24 interchange down to about El Cerro. So drivers have been getting used to that for over a year now. You can go on to the next slide. So when tolling starts, the main thing that will change is that solo drivers can use the lane and pay a toll. But the other change will be the toll zones themselves. So we're adding, currently in southbound, the lanes that have been open, we've always had 2 toll zones. So we're splitting one of those toll zones into 2. So in total now there will be 5 toll zones going southbound. So drivers will see different signs and different destinations as they travel southbound. But other than that, everything else is going to be the same as what they're used to if they've been using the existing open lanes, in that fast track is required to use the lanes. And if you're going to be driving as a carpool, you definitely want to have that tag in the car so you can set it in the position to get free tolls. Also, motorcycles and buses are free, or people in van pools as well, and those vehicles need the toll tag in the car. So clean air vehicles, if they're solo drivers, they pay half price tolls. This is a policy that was introduced last October when the 880 express lanes opened. We started this policy on 680. So in order to drive solo as a clean air vehicle and pay a half price toll, clean air vehicles need to apply for and obtain a special fast track CAV toll tag. And then solo drivers in non-clean air vehicles will pay full tolls, and like the open, like has always been, the hours will be 5 a.m. to 8 p.m. So go on to the next slide. So now I'll just take a few minutes to talk about what we've been seeing on the 680 express lanes in terms of volumes. This chart shows from when the lanes opened till June of 2021, so Q2 2021. This is calendar years on this chart. So you can see that we had quite a drop in trips when the start of COVID. If you recall, we actually didn't even toll for 2 months. From March 20th through May 31st, there was no tolling activity. So, and then we started again in June. So you can see in the gray bar show the difference from quarter to quarter, the ups and the downs. And you can see that for the most recent quarter, we're back up to 1.6 million trips in the lanes, which if you go back, we like to compare year over year. So, but going back to Q2 of 2020 is somewhat pointless since conditions were so abnormal. So we go back to Q2 of 2019. We had 1.9 million express lane trips then. Now we have 1.6 million. So that's only off by about 15%. Okay, you can go to the next slide. This just shows some average hourly maximum volumes in the lanes. Just, people are curious, well, what's going on out there with traffic? And so, through on the express lanes throughout the day, the volumes are down about 27% compared to that Q2 2019. Oh no, I'm sorry. This actually compares to Q4 2019. I apologize. This is a slightly different. So we're still, so that was the quarter right before COVID began, because even Q1 of 2020, because we had by March trips were starting to drop off, and then we actually stopped tolling on March 20th. So the most recent chronological quarter that was not affected by COVID is Q4 of 2020. So from the quarter that just finished compared to then, overall throughout the day, volumes are down about 27% on the express lanes. And you can see that then that's what's shown in the first set of bar charts. And the second two sets look at the peak hours in the peak directions. So the second set is the AM peak period southbound. And there the blue bars, which are the express lanes, volumes are down about 36%. So more, the difference is more pronounced southbound in the AM. Northbound in the PM, the volumes, that's the last set of charts, the blue bars in the last set of charts. So northbound in the PM were only off by 14%. So, but, and then the orange bars are the general purpose lanes. And you can see that the maximum volumes in the general purpose lanes, most are down 6%. And actually there is some growth in volume from Q1. Oh, and yeah, but anecdotally, there is growth in volume from Q1 2021 to Q2 2021 in those volumes. Next slide, please. So just looking at the speeds. So both the general purpose and express lanes are moving faster in the peak periods than they were pre-COVID, in the range of about 11 to 23% faster. But we see, however, that the northbound is slowing from Q1 to Q2. So the red is the current quarter. So that's what we're looking at. That's what's going on right now. So southbound AM peak, the express lane speed, and in that time period, we're seeing an average throughout the entire corridor of 81 miles per hour. So that's a change of 3% from the last quarter up, but and still up 19% from pre-COVID. So, and then looking in the northbound PM peak, we see that the average for that time period is 70 miles per hour. So that's off 4% from the last quarter, but up about 11% from what it was pre-COVID. So that's some of the highlights of what's going on. Oh, wait, one more slide. Go ahead, Darlene. We have trip types and tolls. So it's interesting to see that the share, I think it's logical that the share of trips that are toll-free, because they're mostly made in carpools, they're down about 12% from pre-COVID quarters. And as a result, the share that are SOVs is up 7%. And unfortunately, our violation share is up about 5%. So, and then in terms of the average assessed tolls, we did see an increase from Q1 2021 to Q2 2021 by as much as 44%, but it's still down from the last pre-COVID quarter by as much as 75% that we see southbound. So for that peak hour average assessed toll, for the average assessed toll overall throughout the course of the day, like going southbound, it's still about 75% lower than what it was in the pre-COVID months. So things are on the upswing in terms of getting back to normal, but not there yet. So that covers some of the highlights, and I'm happy to take any questions you have. And if I can't answer them, I will take them back to our team and get you answers.
Okay.
I see hands.
I do too. So actually I saw Karen Stepper's hand first, and then committee member Hudson, and then Darlene, if we could take the PowerPoint down.
Okay.
So that we can see others. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. Those are quite interesting. Hard to read as fast as you can go.
I know. I'm sorry about that.
I'm still like wondering what the CHP thinks of the fact that the speeds went up. The average is 81 miles per hour, which I don't believe is our speed limit.
No. And the speed data is interesting because it really depends how you slice and dice the speed data, because that if you look the entire corridor for the whole day, there's a lot of times and parts of it that are going pretty fast. So it is, it got very high. But not.
But is that affecting the enforcement or not?
We have not heard anything from the CHP about their concerns on 680. They've expressed some concerns on 880, but they've not raised any red flags. They're not concerned about that.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you. Committee member Mayor Hudson.
Yeah, Barbara, I'm a little bit different. You kind of touch on it with the very first thing you showed us with all the blue lines and everything. They all end at Al Costa, which just happens to be the Alameda Contra Costa border. Is there anything moving forward on Alameda? Because I'm telling you, the traffic that I'm seeing on 580 is just, it's monstrous. And they're tech people coming from San Joaquin. It's getting worse. But what difference does it make if you get onto the freeway and you can't move anywhere, right at Pleasanton and Dublin? Is there anything forward thinking that maybe we can get that moving further? I understand there was a little problem with some politics there, but maybe it's changed.
That's a good question. You bring up a very good point. That you only ask good questions. That I think everyone on this panel understands too. I mean, that's a problem with the northbound express lane where it stops there at Livorno. We have that gap between there and 242 and in Contra Costa. So with all these projects, filling the gaps is critical. And as far as that portion of 680 that runs from, I think you are probably aware that in Alameda County, they're working on making a parallel northbound lane to the one that's already southbound. And then a future project would then be to fill that gap. MTC and Amy's well aware of this. We have a strategic plan for the express lanes, and it's all laid out in that plan. Off the top of my head, I cannot remember timelines for when we think that project would be in the queue.
That's kind of why I'm bugging, is because Amy's listening. But what I'm seeing going on out in San Joaquin County, I mean, Tracy's going over 100,000 people. They're all tech. They all think they can Zoom. And they all find out the hard way, as I did when I went into the valley for some stupid reason Saturday. You can't get back. And all of it, you look at it, it's like constant heading south when they get off of 580. And the reason I start thinking about it is because we got the presentation, I think Matt might even, no, I don't think that's on the agenda tonight, where we were talking about doing a, what do you call those darn things? The lights where you can get onto the freeway. Well, they're talking about getting from freeway to freeway, which we have on 680 right now, getting onto 580. Well, as this traffic is just, I mean, these are huge population numbers that are changing quickly. We're going to get some complaints. I'll tell you that Newell caught it right away. And I hope somebody's pushing Alameda to get their act together, because that doesn't work where you're doing 81 miles an hour down to 8. It doesn't fill the bill of what we call less traffic congestion.
Yes, there's a lot of projects in that plan that need to be be prioritized as things go on. Dave, Mr. Rosner, I will look at the planning and find some information in it for you. Send it along.
And when are we going to have meetings? Never.
When are we having meetings on that?
375. Yeah, Beal.
Oh.
Okay. Committee member Sauce.
Thanks. Barbara, thank you for the presentation. That was really interesting. Do you have a sense of, like, looking forward, what are the assumptions about, whether the levels, the numbers are going to come back to pre-COVID levels, and or are you seeing changes in patterns that have emerged recently that affect your thinking going forward?
I don't have a crystal ball.
Of course not.
To an extent, but this is something that's really fun to think about, I will say. To an extent, this is somewhat my opinion, but I think a lot of us are feeling this way. Even as I was pointing out how just even the trend is different between southbound and northbound. We're still not seeing the commute come back. We're seeing traffic come back, but it's not so much the commute. So to the extent that the traffic that AM southbound is really not there, in the PM, the northbound traffic is. So it's the little bit of AM commuters still coming back, plus a whole lot of other different ways of driving and being. So I think this is it is going to be interesting just to see what happens after September, October, because from what I understand and what sort of just feels like it's in the tea leaves as opposed to like real data is that a lot of companies are saying, back in person by maybe in September and October, but it's hybrid and we don't know exactly what that means, how much flexibility you have. So I think we'll have to see after that how it shakes out. And then if we have a real different sense of where this traffic is coming from, I think that could create a lot of new challenges for us, as these lanes have been built for trying to encourage more carpooling. And even in the decline in carpooling that you see, like a 12%, the carpools are down about 12%. The share is, you could say there's still a decent number of them. So you could say that that's sort of the family pools that have always been there, but maybe that colleague to colleague carpool, that's what's gone from the mix. And if we're not getting that kind of traffic back, I think it's going to be even more challenging than it was in the past to get more doubling up of ridership. It's not the kind of trip that is regular, is convenient to share with somebody else. So we'll see. We will definitely have a lot of thinking to do along those lines, is my perspective. Because we really, and it's what is interesting too is this afternoon traffic. Member Hudson, I don't know when you were coming back, if it was the after. I mean, I agree with you. It's crazy, but focus group of one. I mean, now I'm one of those out there driving around and random, and that was never the case when I was going to the office.
Mine was 12.
Everything work has changed, and so we will definitely be looking at be needing to do more data analysis to understand who these people are and how we address it.
Thank you. Any additional questions or comments? And committee member Worth and your assistant.
And my assistant, this is Will. See, we're planning for you, Will. By the time you're driving, we'll have this solved. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you so much for your the report and also just your insights too into sort of this 30,000 look at who is commuting and where. You know, what you made a very interesting comment earlier. You said that the commute isn't back, but the job, you know, the sort of describing the from a qualitative standpoint where you think the traffic is coming from. And I noticed going east from Orinda and then north on 680 in the afternoon, it starts early, as you, I think, pointed out. So is your sense that there just isn't the robust commuting back into the Tri-Valley and to south, the Santa Clara at this point, but more they're just sort of the enough random jobs that are creating the congestion?
It's either enough random jobs. I mean, my feeling is that yes, the commute for those traditional type of jobs is not
right.
I mean, I don't know if you've had any presentations from Bishop Branch, or, you know, I don't know what's going on, if they're starting to come back, but you know, that I really feel like that traditional job is still working largely at home, you know. And so who is it out there in the middle of the afternoon? It's a good question. You know, we're maybe when kids go back to school, it'll be a little bit different, but you know, up until now, it could have even been, you know, parents driving their kids at 1 in the afternoon because everyone's patterns are changed. I don't know if it's different kinds of jobs or just different, you know, is it just that we're home and we are able to do things during the day that we would otherwise have put at night or on the weekends? Oh, Amy, you're on mute.
Barbara, again, thank you so much. And Dave, I know Alameda County has funding in their plans for improving, you know, and expanding the express capacity on the 680 route. I'm just not sure how far it comes up to the county line, but we certainly can find that out.
It doesn't have to come to the county line as long as it goes south of 580, because that's not the county. You still have a mile.
Okay.
But these people coming from San Joaquin County,
oh yeah,
trucks especially, they fill that thing from 5 in the morning on.
Right. Oh, it's tremendous. Yep. Tremendous, meaning it's huge amounts of traffic.
Right. Well, thank you. And first of all, thank you, Barbara. And just remembering great insights, great thoughts on, and all of us wish we had that crystal ball to know what actually is going to happen. But one of the important pieces of information is that the tolling starts on August 20th, right? And so we want to make sure that for those who watch these late at night, that everybody remembers that that's happening. And thank you for the outreach that MTC has been doing to all of our cities and towns and agencies to make sure that we're helping get the word out as well. And are there any members of the public who want to ask a question on this item or comment on this item? If so, please raise your hand. And not seeing any hands come up, I will thank you again, Barbara, and look forward to probably another year or so when you'll come back for another presentation. So thank you.
All right, well, thank you for the opportunity, and enjoy the rest of your meeting.
Thank you. And of course, you're more than welcome to.
Madam Chair, you're on mute. Teresa, you're on mute.
Thanks. I've actually had a pretty good record of not having had anybody have to say that to me for a while, but I now will go on to item 6B, which is to get another update on the Contra Costa Countywide Vision Zero framework. And Colin and Terrence, welcome back. And we look forward to hearing your presentation.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Thank you. Let's share screen. PowerPoint. Doesn't look like it's showing on your end, right? Not yet.
Not yet.
Okay.
It shows that you've there you go.
Here we go. Okay, thank you. So today's update is focused on a few different things. So clarifying the origin and the intent and the purpose of the Common Collision Corridor map as part of Countywide Vision Zero, and prioritizing projects in terms of what that means for potential funding decisions countywide and for local agencies. And then lastly, in terms of enhancing the Common Collision Corridor map to include additional details. So I'll kick it over to Terrence, and he can walk us through the interactive map so that you can see the specific locations of collisions. So this first slide is just a reminder that this effort was looking at data from 2008 through 2017, SWTR's data through UC Berkeley's SafeTrex tool. And this is the same approach that's used very commonly nationally and globally. However, based on the 2018 adopted countywide and bike ped plan, staff was asked to focus on people walking and biking, and so the highway collisions were excluded from analysis, and property damage only were also. And so we also were asked to focus on pedestrian priority areas in terms of the collision data. And so the general patterns that were found in that 10-year period were these ones. And this slide I want to highlight in terms of potential funding ideas that the authority board could decide on is, if there ends up being a countywide project development process that includes focusing on schools and senior facilities, for example, if the idea is to focus on seniors and youth, and then that would be each of the 4 subregions being able to participate. There are other, these other patterns include the trail crossings in terms of East Bay Regional Parks District. So there's some coordination that CCTA can certainly help with there. And there is a difference in terms of countywide safety priority versus local safety priority, because the next steps would be a local roadway safety plan that each city would develop and prioritize their own projects and priorities at the local level. And then that goes to the countywide level in terms of countywide priorities. So these are the maps that we've seen before in terms of walking and biking, and I'm going to kick it over to Terrence to show the individual collision locations.
Yeah, hey everyone, I'm gonna try to take over screen sharing. This might take a couple seconds, but let me know when you're seeing stuff.
We are seeing things.
Okay, cool.
Maps, actually, and your PowerPoint.
Awesome. So I believe last time folks were curious about, actually seeing the dots that really fueled the lines. So I'm happy to show everyone this this web map that we can zoom around to really see the dots. So right now I have toggled on, as you can see, is let me just go to the legend here. We got the safety priority locations for folks who are walking and the collisions that went with it to create this network. You really do see, really put the dots to the lines, as it were. You can see really how we, how this process went for us So the small gray dots are the sort of minor injuries. With black, you have a severe injury, and with our reds, where unfortunately that's a fatality. And as we've discussed previously, we've created this for really all three modes. So this is our network for folks biking against the collisions involving folks biking. And we do have a one for all modes, but obviously that gets to be very crowded. With that, I'm going to turn it over to something a little bit more visually unobtrusive, and turn it back over to Colin in order to you folks.
Right, so the future Measure J transportation funding is not anticipated to be solely dependent on the countywide Vision Zero. These maps are intended at a countywide level, looking at this data as a starting point, but there's the thought that the local road safety plans would analyze the locals' priorities as it relates to their data, their weighting criteria, and their ranking. And with that, I'm available for any questions.
Okay, thank you. And I think for now, unless someone, when they ask a question, wants to have the PowerPoint back up, could we please take it down? Stop sharing. Thank you. And are there any committee members who have any questions or comments? Committee member Sauce.
Thank you. Thank you, Colin. Thank you, Terrence. So I have a question about something in the staff report. And you touched on it, Colin, but I'd like to explore this a little bit more. So it says project funding is not anticipated to be limited to only the corridors on the maps, but will the corridors on the map be a factor, or will projects in those corridors be prioritized over ones that are not? So in other words, if it's not in the area, then you're not out of business, but you might have to stand in line behind a project that is in one of the corridor areas.
Yeah, it generally depends on the funding source, because each funding source has different criteria. But in terms of what's anticipated for Measure J funding, it's not anticipated that it would be something that isn't each subregion, and includes criteria that doesn't just include the 3% of roadways. Because if you look at one of the slides that I had was showing that 86% of the collisions for people biking or walking occurs on 3% of the roadways. But if we look at the 2018 Bike and Ped Plan countywide, there's quite a few other criteria that are considered as part of Measure J transportation funding that aren't only safety.
So as a follow-up to that, it says in the staff report, if local agencies identify their priority projects within their jurisdictions, for example, using authentic engagement per the guide, those projects can be considered for Measure J funding. So two-part question, Colin. What does using authentic engagement per the guide mean? And I apologize, I don't know the answer to that. And then just again, how does the local agency identifying priority projects outside of these identified corridors relate to, the Measure J funding?
Sure. So in terms of the engagement piece, there's a section of the Vision Zero Transportation Safety Policy and Implementation Guide that includes the guidance on authentic engagement. It generally includes ideas of meeting people where they are, and so that there's a more equitable representation in terms of who is participating countywide, to make sure that there's feedback from each of the different communities countywide. And then can you repeat your second question?
Well, the other question, Colin, is I gather from the staff report that local agencies have the ability to identify priority projects within their jurisdictions, right? And so my question is, in terms of Measure J funding, where does that proposed project stack up against the identified corridors in what you just showed us in terms of priority? Or is that unanswerable?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on
factors.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Committee Member Worth.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. If again, Colin and Terrence, thank you very much for coming today again I know that we've had a number of questions over the last few months each time this comes before us, so I appreciate you coming back. Quick question. First of all, is it possible to see that interactive map offline? I saw a lot of Walnut Creek, but didn't quite get west to Orinda. So I'd like to see, it'd be nice to be able to go through. The other thing is, this is 2017. We're in the middle of 2021. There's been a lot increase in bicycle use. Do we anticipate getting any of these statistics updated? I mean, it's a fair amount of time so what's the lag time in terms of getting the data?
In terms of SWTR's data, in some cases it can take more than a year, but this effort kicked off in 2019 after the 2018 bike ped plan. Okay. So the idea is that we're going to use as recent and strong data, better data as it becomes available. And in terms of some of the local agency staff that we've been contacted by in terms of collaboration on their local roadway safety plans, is that they are in some cases using more recent data sets, and that's to be expected.
So the new data sets that Contra Costa Transportation Authority has purchased, and I think most of our SWAT cities are participating in that will include data that will be used for analysis like this, for looking at bike pedestrian projects.
Yes, that's the thought.
Yeah, okay. So I guess one of the things that I'm concerned about, and I'm just trying to understand, there's a lot of qualifying in the language that I'm hearing that talks about, well, you could apply if you're not in this framework. And, because of the kind of the macro nature of this data, that I'm just trying to understand, not only are we thinking about Measure J, I mean, Measure J has a limited lifetime at this point, but there's also an awful lot of federal money that flows through MTC, it goes to CCTA, and then that's really the bulk of a lot of the investment in bike and pedestrian. So, federal clean air dollars. So are you going to be treating this? I mean, will there be a policy discussion about how this program will impact those dollars as well? And again, the same really questions come up. how does something like a safe routes to school pedestrian bike pathway fit into this in order to be able to compete for things like OBAG funding and things like that. So given the nature of what this analysis does, it's not 100% of the problem. It's we're taking the top 80% or the top 20%, and that gets the priority. And then you have all these other projects that are really, the goal is to improve pedestrian and bicycle safety. And one of the reasons there may not be numbers is that because it's not safe, people aren't riding bikes or walking to schools in certain areas. So that's kind of a broad question, and I see John's ready to answer too. So thank you.
Go ahead, John.
Thank you, board members. Yeah, I just want to chime in a little bit. I've sat through these meetings, and I really appreciate your comments, and you have very good comments. I just want to take a step back a little bit and just say that the map, we've been focusing on this map, this high injury network, and the way it's portrayed and so forth. I understand the question and the comments, but then this is one way of showing the data that was collected, and it's just one way. There's many methods and ways that the data can be shown in other data too. So I think the purpose of this Vision Zero exercise was to present the information in just one way. I think we're kind of jumping ahead of ourselves a little bit when we talk about funding. I know we haven't even broached the topic of policy yet, because every time a funding opportunity comes up from CCTA or money that's flows through CCTA, we create a funding process, creating criteria, creating a process of what criteria do we take into consideration. It could be the high injury network could be a factor, it could be one of 20 factors, could be one of 10. That hasn't been discussed yet. There's a lot of other factors that can be considered. So I think this might be just a little bit premature when we're talking about funding. I think, and then as board member Worth mentioned, there's other funding out there that goes through MTC, state and federal funds that CCTA, we don't even create the criteria. So I think we just got to keep in mind that this is helpful, for the cities. If it's not helpful, there's other criteria that's out there. And then I think in the staff report, and I did work with Colin on the staff report, we wanted to be as succinct as possible. I think the original staff report was like 12 pages, but we cut it down to just really cut to the chase and cut to the point of addressing your questions and concern. And again, it boils down to this is just one way of showing the data. It is not a one-stop. It doesn't end here. And then also, again, just want to repeat myself, the funding aspect of it. There is, CCTA staff can work with the cities on coming up with other ways to prioritize your own network, because this is a county-wide level. I think it's completely different. The parties, and if we, or whatever we call it, it is different than the parties set by the cities. So I just want to mention that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. And thanks, Amy and Renata, for the questions. Are there any other questions or comments from SWAT members? I'm not seeing any. Any members of the public who would like to comment on this item, please raise your hand, or one hand, and we will let you do that. And not seeing any hands raised. And this was again an update, information only. So we don't have a vote for this. I want to thank Colin and John for bringing this back again, and for Terrence for the additional data. And I know that Amy had asked about how we can access the interactive maps online. And so I guess if you could share that with Lisa and or Darlene, and then they could share that out with us. I see some nodding of heads, so that would be great to do that. And so some of us do love digging into that data, and I agree that I was having a little bit of trouble seeing the where the data and where the different accident data showed up. So anyway, thank you again. And I think that we won't see you next time, but I also appreciated in the staff report that you noted that CCTA is standing by always for technical assistance and working with the cities on our plans. And so thank you for that. And we will move on to our next regular agenda item, which is to receive an update from Contra Costa Transportation Authority Action Plan update and schedule. And Matt Kelly from CCTA will be providing us with this update. Again, another information only update. Hi, Matt. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair Geringer. Good to be here in front of SWAT this afternoon. And to Commissioner Hudson, I am not going to be talking about ramp metering today, but just a reminder on the Innovate 680 project, it's the CARM ramp metering. So corridor adaptive ramp metering. So it's that smart metering. I know Commissioner Hudson is a fan of it, so I thought I'd bring it up. We're here to just a quick update on the action plan update process. Some of you, most of you may know CCTA is going to begin its countywide transportation plan update in the next year. But the first step of that is updating the action plans. You as SWAT, you're the lucky RTPC that gets to approve 2 action plans, one for La Miranda and one for our Tri-Valley Transportation Commission with our friends to the south of the county line. You may, I'll get into the inner workings of the update, but you may remember over the last year, we've been updating our growth management program to reflect the changes at the statewide level to CEQA due to SB 743, which removed a level of service from the equation, added in VMT. So when we made those changes to the growth management program, one of the next steps was to update the guidance for the action plan development that is part of the growth management program. So I'm not going to get into the details of those updates, but I will touch on the parts of it that kind of affect the overall nature of the action plans, and then I'll touch on what affects you, the board of SWAT, when it comes to updating the action plans. First, when we get going in the fall, we have agendized a couple of meetings with the RTPCs in the fall to really kick things off. So I'm not trying to kick things off today. I'm just kind of giving you a preview. So the first step will be to reopen those action plans. We call them the 2017 action plans, but really they were developed back in 2013 and 2014, kind of put on hold for a couple of years. We did some sales tax measure development in that meantime, and then came back and adopted the action plans and the CTP in 2017. So they need to be looked at again. They're getting old. They've got some dust. And so we'll be looking at everything in there, the goals, the actions, the projects, the routes themselves, and then updating all the demographic data that's changed since that time. So as part of the changes to the growth management program that I was talking about, we updated our definition of routes of regional significance. Before they were primarily freeways and major arterials. We still have that category under roadways, that first bullet. Wait, am I even sharing my screen here? I'm not, am I?
Thanks, Matt. I was just through the chat, I was just sending Darlene a message that we need to share the screen. So I'm glad you caught that. Thank you.
Yeah, I thought that you were just doing the presentation freestyle. So
it was the first thing I was going to do, and then I got
there you go. There you go. Thank you, Matt.
Sorry about that. Okay, so so that first bullet is roadways. So you will continue to be able to have all your major roadways and the freeways as routes of regional significance. What we've done is add transit. So major transit facilities, we're not talking buses that run once an hour, most likely. We're probably talking BART lines, major rail stations, and frequent bus lines, including those that go up and down the 680 corridor, serving the Bishop Ranch Business Park as potential routes. You guys get to decide what those actual routes may be. And then a pedestrian and bike network. So your major bike and pedestrian facilities, you guys have some significant ones both in La Miranda and in the Tri-Valley. Then we added 3 non-modal topics to the action plans. So climate change, basically kind of greenhouse gas, VMT, what the action plans are looking at a sub-regional level, not at a route specific level. Safety, so how are collision rates changing based on the action plans and the projects in the action plans? And then equity, how are we impacting groups of different ethnic and socioeconomic backgrounds? And we've got, neighborhoods we've identified up and down the corridor that we'll be looking at. And then once again, as always, with the growth management program, we want everything consistent across the county. So that was one major thing. We wanted all these topics to be in all the action plans because they do form the countywide plan. So it helps to have things consistent at the action plan. Next slide. So the first task is to really refine the action plan scope and start collecting the data. So we've met with your tax, and we've also tasked your RTPC manager with commenting on our proposed scope. So we're working with them to fine tune that scope, make sure we've got the right things in there for each RTPC. Like I keep saying, you guys are special. We know we've got 2 action plans to deal with you guys. So we've got double the budget going to SWAT, but there may be other things we need to be thinking about that we haven't identified in the scope. And, one may be public involvement, which we're not used to in past action plan updates. And we know that's been a theme that's arisen over the last several months. So then the task will be kicking off kind of now and moving into the fall is collecting all that data, looking at the status of the MTSOs. And just to get you used to it, our MTSOs are multimodal transportation service objectives. There are performance measures. That's what they are. They just have a fancy long name. They're now going to be renamed regional transportation objectives. So don't want you to get caught up in the name. They are performance measures for our different routes. So we'll be cleaning up the land use data. We may need help from the jurisdictions to do that. Start modeling the conditions out there and providing summaries that we can bring back to you. Because knowing what's going on today and what's happened since 2017 helps us frame and then update our action plans. So here's a little bit more of that. We assess the existing action plan and identify potential changes. So you're going to be looking at your existing routes, saying, do these make sense? Should we add? Should we subtract? And then with those new routes, what are we going to add? Which transit routes? Which bike ped routes? And then something new is when you've got a route that crosses an RTPC boundary, like 680, like the Iron Horse Trail, like 24, you're going to be meeting with that neighboring RTPC and coming up with some consistent measures. So, you don't have one RTO on one side of the line and a diametrically opposed RTO on the other side of the line. We want our routes to, they don't recognize changes in RTPCs. Our traveling public doesn't recognize it. So we want the action plans to reflect that. So when we are coming up with these new objectives, the new routes, and those new actions that go along with them, those actions are projects. Those projects are designed to mitigate impacts from land use to your routes. You'll be coming up with all those. We will have a stakeholder workshop to inform the stakeholders, which is really the local jurisdictions, on the changes. And we will be presenting that along with an updated list of projects. Those projects could be programs, and we'll present all those to you, the policy boards. And here's the schedule here. So the real work that you guys will be involved with will start in late this year, in December, when we start bringing the information that comes from the tax up to the boards. So we think starting in December and then going through the early spring, we'll be kind of fine tuning those new routes, those new actions, and then and also we'll have those coordination meetings between the two RTPCs at that same time. And then in the late spring, early summer of next year is when we'll be really finalizing things, and we'll have had a chance to test out a lot of those new measures to show you what the data looks like. And then you'll be asked to make a final decision in June on what your action plan will look like. It says adopt final action plan there, but technically you're approving them and sending them off to CCTA for inclusion in the countywide plan. You don't actually adopt your own action plan till after the countywide plan is adopted. So it comes back a year or so later, which is a strange sort of nuance, but you'll be approving and forwarding to CCTA in next June as proposed. So that's what I have for you today. We had some questions. Does this look right to you? Is there anything unique about your RTPC that we need to address, and does the schedule look okay? So you can give us that feedback today. You can give that to Lisa. We'd be happy to take any comments. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. And if we could take the PowerPoint down, and do any commissioners, committee members have comments or questions for Matt? Any thoughts on schedule? Committee member Stepper, and then Worth, and you're on mute, Karen. And
on that last picture you had, where you had this concrete structure with grass in the middle, and even with the sidewalk on one side, and then it's the street on the other, and there's kids tossing around. I've never seen anything like that. Could you explain the safety of that?
I don't know that it was put there to show safety. I'm looking at it, I'm trying to think. I think that's...
Well, there's no ambulance in the picture, but I'm picturing one. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that picture. It's really just, we're just trying to show different modes in these pictures.
Right, and we like to consider different modes. So I thought, in the future, I'd like to know what that is. So it doesn't have to be today. Okay.
Yes, if we're proposing that for your action plan, you could be assured we won't give you a thorough explanation.
Thank you.
And minus the ambulance. Committee member Worth.
Not in there. Don't
Oh
worry.
yeah, no, I know.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Matt, thank you very much for coming today. I remember one of the presentations you did at a focus conference a long time ago, and it was really insightful into the complexities of putting together these action plans, and particularly going into the modeling that goes into them that you all get to do. But there's obviously been a huge amount of change in state law with regards to MTSOs and now with our, the RENA requirements. So, and I know that our planning staffs have been working with the authority on some of those issues to make sure that we have a consistency. Where is that happening? Has that already kind of happened in terms of concurrence with state requirements, or do you see that as that's going to evolve as we put these together? Because obviously we want to be able to not have things in conflict.
Yeah, so, well, one, this aligns, like I mentioned with SB 743, but I think RENA is probably the bigger question.
Right.
And so where we want to align or not align with RENA is when we update the land use. We get land use from MTCA bag that comes out of their model that they use for Plan Bay Area. when we get that data from them, we are allowed by ABAG to revise the land use within our own travel model. So what we do is we work with the local jurisdictions to look at what's in the model for their, in their jurisdiction at these small traffic zones. And we move it around to make sure it represents not necessarily RENA, because as most people know, RENA is a planning and zoning exercise. It's not it doesn't necessarily mean that development is going to happen at any specific time. So what we do is we work with your local staffs and make sure what we're putting in the model for your 2020, for your 2030, for your 2040 is aligned with what you think is going to actually be on the ground. And you guys know that the best. You've got your general plan, which kind of guides that. And then you're talking to local developers, you know where their interests are. And if they want to be building thousands of units in jurisdiction X, as RENA seems to think is going to happen. So we want it to be grounded in reality, because we can't have realistic forecasts if we don't have a realistic baseline. And, if we're putting in thousands more units than are actually going to be on the ground in 10 years or 8 years, the next RENA cycle, then we're going to get, forecasts that are, that are out of lines, and then we're on wrong forecasts.
Okay, great, Matt. And then, Madam Chair, if I could just follow up, one quick follow-up question to that. So I guess the assumption is that SB 743 will be the default. And then if there's any other discussion, it can be, because we don't want to create a situation where you have a kind of a city caught in the middle, jurisdiction caught in the middle.
Yeah, the action, what's in the action plans you don't have to assume that in your CEQA documents, but there's nothing in conflict in the action plans with CEQA.
Okay, all right, thanks, Matt, thank you.
Great, thank you. Committee Member Hudson.
Yeah, Matt, I was almost going to let this go, but it just, sometimes the curiosity button just gets a little, we're changing MTSOs to RTOs. I mean, R2, I feel like I can see a little droid out there. Amy was spot on. We get all this legislation, and MTSO is pretty prevalent in it now. I mean, was there a logical reason? I know when we changed from MOS to mobility on demand, it was because DOT thought MOS was European, and we were going for a grant. Is it something that simple, or somebody just wanted to change things just to say, hey, we're paying attention?
That's a great question. I'm not a fan of changing up our acronyms on people, because the first acronym is difficult enough to learn. So we did decide to change them because they are not focused on service. When we took level of service out of CEQA, or not we, but when the state took level of service out of CEQA, it was because they didn't want to focus on vehicle service. So it was more about objectives and less about service.
And the we is the state, Matt?
Yeah, we is the, no, CCTA and our consultants. You can blame it on us. The state changed the laws, we just changed our action.
You mean to tell me the state's still going to be using MTSOs, and we're going to have
that's only us. MTSO is unique to CCTA. So yeah, that's why I said think of it just as a performance measure. It's a long acronym for performance measure. Same with the new one, RTO. They're really just performance measures.
Okay.
Sorry that we've gone all over the place with our acronyms. You can blame staff.
I do personally like the regional collaborative nature of the change, and that additional change of making sure that we're collaborating with other RTPCs. And one that you missed besides 24 was the Pleasant Hill Road corridor, which is near and dear. And I know it's in your mind, Matt. I just meant when you were highlighting examples, but I do very much like that part of it. So are there any other committee members who have any comments on this item, and another opportunity for any members of the public to comment on this item. If you would like, please raise your hand. And I'm not seeing any hands real or Zoom virtual. So we will thank you again, Matt, and we will move on to our next agenda item. And we look forward to working on the action plans and actually I want to thank all the staff who are here for already doing the work and working on those plans as we're moving forward. So thanks for the update, Matt. Moving on to agenda item 6D, approve an appointment to the Contra Costa County Accessible Transportation Strategic Plan Task Force. And Lisa, you're going to introduce this item, and it is an action item.
Yes, it is. Thank you. Good afternoon, SWAT members. This afternoon, we are seeking a recommendation from SWAT to appoint one SWAT member to the Contra Costa Transportation Authority Accessible Transportation Strategic Plan Task Force. That's a huge acronym, so I'm just going to say ATSP. We need more acronyms, right? Okay, so this past March, the Authority Board adopted the ATSP and directed staff begin implementing the recommendations and strategies identified in the ATSP, primarily the formation of a task force to carry out all of the initial tasks in the plan. This past June, the Authority Board extended the agreement with Nelson Nygaard to help the Authority to move forward the implementation strategies. Both Contra Costa and the Authority staff have been developing the recommendations to ensure that the task force provides the following: a fair representation of stakeholders providing accessible transportation services, adequate knowledge and skills in developing the specific tasks identified in the plan, and representation for the diverse geographic and demographic needs of Contra Costa County. It is anticipated that the appointments be made by the 4 RTPCs as well as all the other stakeholder groups by mid-September, with the first task force meeting to take place in late September or early October. Authority staff will meet with all the new members prior to the first task force meeting to brief them on the background and status of the ATSP. So today it is SWAT TAC recommendation that the SWAT committee appoint one member amongst yourself to represent SWAT on the ATSP task force. Thank you.
And I'm going to take myself off mute. Thank you, Lisa. I said that, but unless you were reading my lips, you didn't actually hear that. I see 2 hands, Amy and then committee member Hudson, or committee member Worth, and then committee member Hudson.
I would like to nominate Dave Hudson to serve as our representative.
Okay.
And I know that
Makes it easy for me, Amy.
There you go, Dave. Beat you to it. But I also I know that Teresa Geringer from La Marinda represents the Authority on that committee. So we always like to have a balanced representation from all the areas in SWAT. So Dave, if you're willing to do it.
No, I want to stay on it. The question I was going to ask really it was with Candace. Do you know I know Karen wants to get on this thing, and I heard Diane, and I don't think we can put 3 on.
No, I think Karen's the one who's going on, if I'm not mistaken, based on a recent agenda. But Teresa may know because she's Diane's staff member, but that was my understanding that Karen would be the representative for the Board of Supervisors, because she does sit on the Authority as well. So, and I'm a big fan of this, but I don't need to sit on it. So.
But I know Diane's transplant. I think she's going on from there. And if you knew differently, then I might try and work it out with 3 CTA or when it comes up there as far as an appointment. You can find out.
Yeah, I'm for some reason in my mind, and I don't recall where I read it, I thought we were appointing Karen to it. So I would say let's just appoint you, Dave. And if at some point I'm on County Connection too. I mean, there are a lot of different ways that I could end up on it if we don't have adequate representation from our end of the county or Board of Supervisors, however that works out. So for now, I would second Amy's motion.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for that discussion. And I know that my understanding was the county board of supervisors was going to be doing their appointment coming up at an upcoming meeting. So, and Dave pointed out about transplant as well. So that I think is August 19th, they'll have their appointment. And I did want to just say though, that for those of you who don't know, Supervisor Anderson, Mayor Hudson, and I'm trying to think if anyone else, but have been served on the PAC for the planning of the accessible transportation strategic plan. And so that is also the interest in continuing that as we move forward to the word that jumped out to me when Lisa was talking about the report was implementation. And I know that it's been a long time coming. And so I do want to also thank Supervisor Anderson for her work on the accessible transportation plan. And Amy, you had your hand up. And
well, just a quick question, Madam Chair. Thank you. Would it be possible? I know that this we've had a major report on kind of recommendations, and now we're at implementation. Would it be possible for staff to just send us an updated email with that report and kind of
sure.
Yep. So we can just get it. I know it comes out in a variety of different ways, and so what the responsibilities of, this sort of next steps, will be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Accessible transportation, Contra Costa has done a tremendous job during the COVID of providing the one seat ride, for example, through our paratransit network, but also knowing that, the county provides a tremendous amount of important accessible transportation independent of the transit agency too. So great, thank you.
So Lisa's nodding her head, but we can definitely send out the full report.
There's a specific strategies that they want this task force to work on. So I'll send that out to all of the SWAT committee members.
Thank you. And thank you for asking for that. And then committee member Stepper.
I just wanted to clarify, appreciated Teresa that you just clarified who had been on the committee already. Because I think when you get on the ground floor, that you deserve the chance to go forward with the implementation because you have so much information at your fingertips at that point in time. And I've seen that happen before. A lot of discussions at individual council meetings as to who was already doing something for 5 years, So I appreciate you bring that to the table. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions or comments or discussion? Any members of the public who would like to make a comment on this item before we vote, please raise your hand. And I'm not seeing any. And then I lost Darlene. Oh, there, Darlene. Will you please conduct the roll call vote? We have a motion from Committee Member Worth and a second from Committee Member Anderson to nominate Dave Hudson.
Yes, that is correct. Committee Member Hudson.
Aye.
Committee Member Anderson.
Aye.
Committee Member Worth.
Aye.
Committee Member Sauce.
Yes.
Vice Chair Stepper.
Aye.
And Chair Geringer.
Aye.
So that item passes 6-0.
And congratulations, Mayor Hudson or Committee Member Hudson, all the different titles.
I know.
And thank you for agreeing to or being willing to continue to serve. And we will move now to opening back up my computer and my agenda. We have written communications in our packets. I don't believe there's any action necessary. And we will move then on to agenda item number 8, discussion for our next agenda. Darlene or Lisa, do you want to update on upcoming items?
Yes, Madam Chair, we will definitely have an update on the action plan, the next steps with the action plan, and information that will be gathered from both LPMC and the Tri-Valley Transportation Council. So we will come back with an update on that. And at this point, that is the only agenda item. I will certainly coordinate with authority staff for any other item that requires action by SWAT.
Okay.
Also, it should, and I'm sorry, Chair, it should also be noted due to the Labor Day holiday, SWAT will meet on September 13th.
Thank you. As I just penciled it in on the 6th, but thank you. Any input from committee members on upcoming agenda? Not seeing any nodding. We will move to adjourn this meeting. Thank you to Darlene and Lisa for moving us forward in a very efficient manner. And thank you all for the discussion. And we will see you again on September 13th, and currently still planned as a Zoom teleconference. So thanks, we're adjourned.
Thank you.
Still
Bye.
Thank you.